I want to thank Ken O'Keefe for his message and Dr. Nasreen for giving her message and the correct message. You know, during the organization of this event, during the succession of emails that were sent in discussing the itinerary of this event, about when it would start, when it would end, and I remember reading that the organizer, may Allah reward them, said that, you know, we hope it doesn't rain today. It hasn't rained as yet, it's beginning to rain now, but I immediately remembered Lima Gabawi. Those of you who know about the struggle of Lima Gabawi in the 1990s in the unideal state, in the words of Noam Chomsky, of Liberia. In the 1990s, Lima Gabawi, together with a Muslim woman from the Mandingo people, the Mandingo African people, called Asatu, would go every day until there were around 100 of them, and they would simply sit on the streets, on the pavement, and they would sit on the streets on the pavement when it was raining and when it wasn't raining, and they would sit on the streets on the pavement when it was hot, and they would sit on the streets on the pavement when it was freezing cold, and they would do that every single day. Every single day. And in fact, it was Lima Gabawi who said that the reason why we're doing this is because when we grow up, we do not want our children to ask us, Mama, what was your role during this crisis? Because their children, daughters were being raped every single day in the civil war in Liberia. And I remembered that irrespective of the rain, irrespective of the heat, we would always campaign for justice all the time. We are in a particular interesting time, at least for a lot of people who have interest in history, not only because of the struggle of Lima Gabawi and the others. This year, in fact, 2013 is a centennial. It's the 100-year anniversary since the death of that great woman, Harriet Tubman, a woman who was called the Moses of her people. Harriet Tubman, we almost hear, at least sentimentally or emotionally, the echo of her words reverberating when Harriet Tubman would say that, you know, keep going. And that is exactly what you would say, keep going. And when you hear the shouting, keep going. And when you see the lights in the woods, the torches in the woods, keep going. And when you hear the dogs barking in the woods, keep going. And she did not share our faith, but we at least would commend the spirit of resistance and sacrifice in that woman, called the Moses of her people, who brought into freedom and safety more than 950 African American slaves. And remembering then the sacrifice of Lima Gabawi, and remembering the sacrifice of Harriet Tubman, we too would also remember the sacrifice and the principle and the courage of Rachel Corrie. And this is also her 10th year since she was killed in occupied Palestine, defending the home of a Palestinian Arab pharmacist, Muslim pharmacist. And she traveled from America all the way there. And she kept her ground, she stayed where she was until the Israeli bulldozers came along, and they bulldozed her to death, and they bulldozed the home at the same time. But it was Rachel Corrie who said that I am witnessing not only the extermination and ethnic cleansing of a people, but I am witnessing the systematic destruction of a people's ability to survive. The systematic destruction of a people's ability to survive. In that then, let us remember, bearing in mind we're speaking about Harriet Tubman, bearing in mind we're speaking about Claudette Colvin, who was in the month of March, Rachel Corrie in the month of March. It was Claudette Colvin who remained on the bus. 8-9 months before Rosa Parks did, she remained, and she was only 16 years old. We have a legacy in our Islamic tradition of young people full of correct zeal. And when the white men came on the bus, and as you know, in civil rights, in that time, white supremacism. She was on the bus, she had to get up because it was full, but she didn't. And in fact, what Claudette Colvin said as a 16-year-old is that I felt as if Harriet Tubman was pushing my right-hand side down. And I felt as if Sionic Truth was pushing my left-hand side down. I couldn't get up. 8-9 months later, in I think October, November of that year, it was Rosa Parks' turn, who of course became very famous, and Rosa Parks said that people have this image of me. They ask me, why didn't you get up? Where is the resistance? Where is the principle of outrage? Why didn't you get up? She said they have this vision of me as being too old. Maybe it's because I was too old. No, I was only 42 or something. I wasn't too old. Some say that it's because I was tired. I wasn't any more tired than I am after a day's work, normal day's work. Rosa Parks said the only tired I was the tired of giving in. The only tired I was the tired of giving in. In remembering all of these, Rosa Parks and Claudette Colvin, in remembering Rachel Corrie, in remembering Harriet Tubman, in remembering the great women during that civil tension in Liberia, here were individuals who refused indifference. They refused to be indifferent. They refused to turn their eyes away. They refused to go blind during a crisis that involved amputation of limbs. I mean, we're speaking about, interestingly enough, if it's Harriet Tubman's centennial, it's also the centennial of the closing of the Congo Relief Association. You know, we should study. I mean, this is Edmund Dean Morel. This is coming from this country. Where are those individuals like Edmund Dean Morel? Almost alone campaigned for the end of the injustice in Congo. Belgium ruled Congo. And he had an interest because, of course, he was working for the exporting of ivory. But at the expense of what? The amputation of limbs, the killing of people, the rape of women. Until he came back to England, began to inform all the people, and they just simply turned their faces away. No one was interested because they're making the money. Who would be interested, of course, in the stopping of trade of ivory from Congo? Until he began to raise his voice. That was a single person. Until people began to listen. And then Mark Twain. It isn't simply Huckleberry Finn. That is not the only reason we remember Mark Twain. Not only for Huckleberry Finn, but for the soliloquy of King Leopold II. We remember him for that because here was a voice of resistance. All kinds of voices of resistance. The poets were involved. The laymen were involved. All people were involved to put an end to the injustice. The similarity in all these people, and as a lesson for us in this time, is never to be indifferent to the suffering or injustice on any person, irrespective of religion or ethnicity or creed or caste, irrespectively. You would never be indifferent. I mean, Stefan Hassel just died a few weeks ago. I mean, that man is in many quarters would be remembered as heroic. In a world of celebrity culture, people worship and idolize celebrities the way that they would adulate Roman emperors. He wrote his last book at the age of 93, Time for Outrage. That is coming from surviving the Holocaust. That is coming from working in resistance. And wrote his big book as a kind of a last testament to humanity about what he has to say. In fact, his penultimate chapter is outrage over Palestine. And he says that the biggest and deepest indignation I have in the world today is for the injustice of the Palestinians. But I will tell you what he says in his concluding paragraph, his last paragraph. And I think this has been echoed across all the speakers today, and something we should remember as we go forward. It isn't simply about 10 years or whatever. We're going to continue with this. And in the words of Lima Gabawi, whether it rains or whether it's hot or whether it's cold, whatever. But if we lose that spirit of resistance and resilience, then we fail as human beings. We fail, all of you, as Muslims, those of you who are Muslims. Because there is no concept of the bystander or the bystander effect in our faith. That we would never just simply sit apathetically. Stefan Hissel concluded his book by saying that we call for a mass public uprising. Not only against all these injustices we see, but he concluded by saying this: we call for a mass public uprising against the means of mass communication that offer nothing but mass consumption as a prospect for our youth. General amnesia and the outrageous competition of all against all. They have everything in place to make us precisely like that. Aldous Huxley spoke about that in the 1930s. Engineered obsolescence, planned obsolescence. We would become the iPad generation of the iPad 1 and the iPad 2 and then the iPad 3. And everything is in place for us to be consumers and live and die in consumption. But in all these examples I've given, one thing that you would see, and also Sophia Scholl, February 22nd, this was her 70th year execution anniversary, put under the guillotine by the Nazis. Here was a woman, again 22 years old, who campaigned against injustice against the Jews in the Holocaust. Is that they had empathy and they were not indifferent, and they had empathy and they were not indifferent. And that is something that we must continue. Where our Prophet said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, al-Muslim akhul Muslim, the Muslim is a brother to another Muslim. But also remembering that whoever loves for others, people, nas, this is quite general. What he loves for himself, then he will be a believer. He does not abandon him, he does not let him go. And the meaning of this is لا يتركه مع من يؤذيه, he does not leave him with the one who harms him. لا يتركه فيما يؤذيه, does not leave him with what harms him. Does not leave him with the calamity that's fallen upon him. And we should always remember that. I want to thank the organizers for organizing this event and thank all of you for coming. The power of popular resistance is powerful. When people come together for this purpose, for this cause, and remember, oftentimes they're around an injustice. Anyone who knows about the civil rights movement would know about the killing of Emmett Till in 1955, and that was a focus point. And then later the Montgomery bus boycott of Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King, but it was killing of Emmett Till. It was a killing of a child. Our sister Aafia Siddiqui is weak, is frail. This is not a war this is a war of terror. This is a war of terror. The false imprisonment, abuse, sexual abuse, torture as a daily occurrence, not only in the case of Aafia Siddiqui, but so many like her. And if we don't do whatever is in our capability to do, even if it's speaking or raising funds or supporting the work of JFAC or H-Hugs or Cage Prisoners or whoever else, then we lose our faith. We lose our faith. So let us not lose hope. Let us not lose hope. Let us always be hopeful and trust in the promise of Allah. Trust in the promise of Allah and make as much effort as we possibly can. We pray for the deliverance and relief for our sister Aafia Siddiqui. We pray that on account of our efforts, small as they are, on account of our sincerity, small as it is and weak as it is, that Allah would release our sister Aafia Siddiqui. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward all of you and reward the organizers. And I truly pray that we would never lose this resilience and this feeling of indignation and this outrage against all the terrible things that are happening in the world. Jazakumullah khairan wa assalamu alaikum.